Ever stood under a sky so wide your secrets felt small? Here on Cowboy Storytime, we ride the stories of the West campfire truths, trail dust memories, saloon whispers. Gritty human, sometimes messy. Every tale is a horizon to chase. Subscribe, pull up a stool, and maybe find a little courage for your own frontier. The sun in Arizona did not shine. It burned. Heat pooled on the red dirt behind the old Harlow livery, where Lena Hart hung upside down from a splintered beam with a rope biting her ankles. Blood throbbed in her skull. The world pulsed. A black crow settled on the ridgepole and clicked its beak, the sound neat and patient like a watch. Her tongue tasted like pennies. Flies stitched the corners of her mouth. The brand on her shoulder, a brown R inside a crude ring, flared with every breath. She tried to swallow and found no spit. A whisper scraped out anyway. "Let me go." Far off, a horse snorted and stopped. Leather creaked, boots crushed mesquite pods. The crow flapped once and rose its shadow, crossing her swollen face. A man stepped into the doorway, tall, hat pulled low. He did not gasp or swear. He looked at the rope, at her eyes, at the beam, the way a carpenter glances over a broken joist. Then his knife flashed clean and quick. He cut one loop, then another, and caught her as gravity took her. The ground tilted. Heat and sky fell sideways. The man's shirt smelled of sun and horse and the sharp bite of metal oil. He carried her across open ground to a dun mare that watched with the bored dignity of a creature that has seen plenty. He lifted Lena like a sack of grain, then climbed up behind her and turned the mare toward the folds of land to the east. Mesquite Draw was a crease of shadow in a country that barely knew shade. His cabin waited there, set against a low bank, a square of plank and patience with a stovepipe and a porch just wide enough for a boot heel and a coffee cup. Inside, everything had a place. Tin cup, clean rags, a Bible scorch-marked along the edge, a pocket watch with its glass cracked, and a photo inside that had been handled too often. He laid Lena on the bed and cut the rope from her ankles. The skin was raw where the fibers had bitten. He worked with rags and cool water, then whiskey that smelled like peppermint and fire. He did not talk much. When he did, the words were flat and steady like fence posts set in hard dirt. "This will sting." She flinched when the cloth touched the brand at her shoulder. He stopped long enough to see it. His jaw tightened. "Who put that on you?" "Randall Kane," Lena said. Her voice was a thread sawn across grit. The man's eyes changed in some unreadable way and then closed again. He rinsed the cloth. He cleaned dust and blood from her face, her wrists, the scores where rope had chewed. His hands were work-strong, careful. When he moved her arm, she smelled him again. Iron oil, sweat, a faint ghost of tobacco long gone cold. "Name," she said. "Cole Mercer. Soldier." "Once?" "What unit?" "12th Pennsylvania." A pause sat between them. In the cabin's quiet, a fly hummed against the window pane and gave up. Heat gathered under the roof. Outside the yard was white with noon. "Antietam," Lena said, not a question. Cole wiped a line of dried blood along her hairline and did not answer. He tugged the blanket to her collarbone and went to the stove. The lid scraped. Water simmered. He poured into a tin cup and set it to cool. Lena's eyes tracked the pocket watch on the table. It lay open, a girl with dark curls staring out from behind cracked glass. Cole's hand came down and touched the watch. He closed it with a click and slid it into his vest. "You saved the wrong person," Lena said. The words came out ragged. "He calls me property." "You were dying." "He will come." "Probably." He put the cup to her mouth and tipped it. The water slid over her tongue and hit her empty stomach like a blessing and a knife. He took it away before she could choke. "Slow," he said. She swallowed air and nodded. The room steadied enough to hold. 2 nights ago, the house at Painted Rock Ranch had breathed like an animal at sleep. Lamps low in the main hall, the smell of saddle soap and cigars. Lena moved soft in bare feet, counting boards that squeaked, counting her own breaths. Randall's office door opened on the 3rd try. Kerosene ghosted the air. She went straight to the desk. Top drawer bills for feed and fencing, bottom drawer locked. She used a hairpin and shook as she worked, breath held, until the pin gave metal on metal a soft click. The drawer slid. Ledger leather dyed a deep, mean blue. Column of figures like fence posts in winter. On the back pages, initials that pinned her stomach. SB. Train routes listed by mile marker. Times circled. Notes in a tight, quick hand that was not her husband's. She turned a page and a folded letter fell into the well of the drawer. Her name on the outside, the curl of it unmistakable. Lena. Hands shaking now. Paper rasped her skin. The ink had blotted in a place where tears had dropped before. Ruth's writing. Lena. I am at St. Brigid's with Father Abel. The bruise is faded. I have work. He asks no questions. If you can come. I hear things about Randall and the Sutter men. I am gathering what I can. The door is open to you. Please be careful. Her throat closed with a sound that had no word. 6 months with no word, and here were all the words at once. She pressed the letter to her chest. Bootsteps in the hall. Well now, Randall Kane said. His shadow filled the doorway. Mac Doolan's hat brim floated just behind him. Pete Larkin flanked the other side. Randall smiled, all teeth and courthouse charm, reading Lena. She tucked the letter into her bodice and put both hands flat on the desk to keep them from shaking. Ruth is alive, she said. Girls like her usually are. Randall stepped in and took the letter out from where she had hid it, fingers neat and practiced. He read just enough for his face to change. St. Brigid's, he said. Father Abel. Interesting. His eyes moved to the ledger. The smile thinned. Nosy wives break things, he said. She backed away and the wall stopped her. I only wanted to understand. The slap came quick. Her head rang. The second blow took her breath. Put her in the livery, Randall said to Mac and Pete, his voice calm, now pleasant as a banker's. Use rope. Sun will quiet her. She spat blood on his boot. He took a handkerchief from his vest and wiped her chin gentler than he had ever been, and that made it worse. You always had spirit, he said. It is noisy. The room returned in stitches. Bed, blanket, the burn of the brand, the cracked Bible. Cole's chair scraped as he set it where he could see both door and bed. He sat with his Colt across his lap and his eyes somewhere far. The evening pushed heat out of the cabin. Night gathered in the corners and then lay down on the floor. Ruth, Lena said when the dark felt thick enough to hold words. My sister. She went to the church in Copper Ridge, St. Brigid's, Father Abel. Cole's head turned. The single lamp put a shine on the scar that ran from his ear into his collar. What about him? Ruth wrote the name, Lena said. She said it was safe. I have heard sermons that carry rifles, Cole said. What does that mean? He did not answer. The tin cup came again at dawn this time with coffee, bitter and hot. He watched the window while she drank the way a man listens to weather from inside his bones. The smell of dust and creosote shifted. There was a taste to the air now, the taste that comes before rain, the kind that promises and does not always keep. Randall will go after Ruth, Lena said. He has the letter. Cole set his boot heel on the floor and leaned back. The chair creaked. He had not shaved. Shadows made hollows on his face he could not fill with sleep. You need strength before you can sit a saddle. We do not have strength, she said. We have time and it is not ours. He said nothing for a long moment. The stove ticked as the last coals settled. A bead of sweat crawled from his temple to his jaw and disappeared into his beard. Lena's eyes slid to the pocket watch again. He saw it and placed his hand over the vest pocket gentler than he had been with any other thing in the room. He lifted the Bible and set it on the shelf. The scorch along its spine made a jagged map. Your family, she said. Once he said. Mine, she said. Ruth. He looked at her. Whatever weighed him seemed to tilt slightly. The tilt was not much, but she felt it. He stood and crossed to the door and opened it to the morning. Light fell in. The yard was already bright. The mare flicked one ear. Somewhere south, thunder said the name of a mountain and swallowed it. Hooves drummed in the distance, faint at first, then clearer than close. Dust rose in a ribbon above the mesquite. 3 riders crested the ridge and came on hats, low coats, flapping sunlight, flashing off iron at their hips. Cole's eyes went flat. He set the coffee tin on the table without looking and reached for his Colt. Keep low, he said. The mare lifted her head and snorted. The crow returned to the ridgepole and clicked once precise as a clock. Cole did not look at Lena again. He took 2 steps out into the yard and met the riders with the flat of his body, turned the Colt low by his thigh. The lead man reined in dust boiling around his horse's hocks. Mac Doolan's mouth worked a toothpick, his eyes lazy and bright. Pete Larkin hung back a half grin, tugging at his cheek like a bad habit. The third one wore a coat that hid too much iron. "Morning, Mercer," Mac said. "Mr. Kane sends for the lady." Cole did not move his gun. "Tell Mr. Kane to come himself." "Kane is a busy man." Mac's smile did not reach his eyes. "You picked a poor stray." Cole shot the dirt between Mac's horse and the porch. The mare danced, jerked the bit. The sound cracked off the bank and rolled back in a wave. Mac's grin dropped. He lifted his hands off his reins very slightly. "Next one is not dirt," Cole said. Silence settled like dust. The third man drew a breath that whistled. Pete's grin twitched and died. Birds went quiet in the mesquite. Then hoofbeats rose behind the riders, far off on the ridge, another string of men maybe, or only cattle moving in the wash. Mac flicked his eyes toward the sound and made his choice. "This is not over," he said. He jerked his chin toward Pete. They pulled their horses around. The third man spat into the dust and followed. The three of them slid down the cut dust, trailing behind like torn cloth. Cole holstered the Colt without looking and turned back inside. "We leave now," he said. Lena pulled herself up on her elbows. The room spun, then steadied. Pain crawled under her skin like ants under bark, but fear for Ruth cut a cleaner path. She swung her legs off the bed. Cole put a hand out. "You will ride in front," he said. "You will hold the horn. You will tell me if you see anyone wearing cane leather." The dun mare was patient while Lena found her balance. The world tilted a little with each breath. Cole's arm was a bar of iron at her back while he mounted up. He clicked to the mare, and they slid into the low country, keeping to shallow cuts where water once ran and would run again if the sky ever gave it. Heat rose. The smell of creosote shifted to something metallic and cool. Once a coyote loped along a ridge, looked down, then turned its face to the west. Cole kept the mare steady, head-low hooves soft. Twice he cut tracks where a shod horse had broken the crust. He studied them without stopping, fresh but not fresh enough to matter. Copper Ridge lifted out of the plain in a heat mirage. A few false fronts, a thin church spire, a line of cottonwoods that leaned toward the creek as if listening. Cole brought the mare around the back of the town, along a fence of sun-bleached posts and wire rusted to a soft orange. They tied the mare in a patch of shade behind a cooper's shed. Lena's legs wanted to fold. She forced them to obey. St. Bridget's sat white against the sky. Its door stood open, and flies chanted in the cool inside. The air smelled of old wax and wet granite, though nothing wet had been here in months. A stained glass lamb looked down with one eye cracked. In the back, a shelf held a chipped basin and a bottle of lamp oil. A boy with a broom leaned against the steps and watched them the way a boy watches people who might be a story later. Cole lifted his hat to shade his eyes. "Father here?" he asked. The boy shook his head. "Gone 2 days. Took a lady with him. Bruised up bad. Said they had to make for Providence before the storms." Where Cole said. The boy pointed north with his chin. "Follow the arroyo. You will see the mine scar when the land starts to wrinkle." "Who told him to go?" Lena asked. The boy shrugged. Men came asking. Men with cane brand belts. He looked at Lena's shoulder, then away. They left the church by the side door. The glare hit like a hammer. Cole's face had locked back into its quiet stone. "We ask at the spur," he said. The silver spur sat in a slump of shade piano, making a brave try at a song over the murmur of men. The place smelled like spilled whiskey sweat and the powder and grease that bake into a room over years. Cole kept Lena close to his left side where his body could take what might come first. The bartender's apron was cleaner than the rest of him. He wiped the same spot on the same board as if it was a job that could be finished. "Doyle," Cole said, and laid down 2 coins that had seen better days. The bartender's eyes flicked to Lena, then to the back door. He scooped the coins and nodded once. The storage room was cooler, barrels stacked to the ceiling. Light came in a seam under a warped door where someone had propped it with a nail. A man sat on a crate with a glass already in his hand. Red nose, redder eyes. He looked them over like he had sold more than a few secrets to more than a few people. "Information," Cole said. "That cost," Doyle said. Cole put another coin on the lid of a barrel. Doyle's fingers moved quick and made the coin vanish. "Father Abel Sutter," Doyle said, rolling the name on his tongue like a curse and a joke. "Not a priest. A Sutter. His brothers run the hills like they own the dirt. Providence Mine is their nest. The church was a front with nice windows." Lena's jaw tightened. "Where did he take her?" "Providence," Doyle said. "He likes his guests where the rock is thick. He tipped the glass. You follow Dry Creek till it forks. Take the east cut. You will see tracks for ore carts. Do not go in straight. Sutter keeps eyes like hawks. Who paid you to keep your mouth shut? Cole asked. Doyle smiled without teeth. Everyone. They stepped back into the heat. The light stung after the dim of the storage room. The alley behind the spur was a ribbon of shade. Lena saw the danger a breath too late. Mac Doolan slid from the right Pete from the left, and two more behind them, boots, quiet on hard-packed dust. 4 guns rode low like promises. Mac's voice was honey and nails. Mr. Kane will take the lady now. You too, Mercer. He misses you. Cole shifted so that Lena's shoulder met the wall. He lifted his hands an inch away from his sides. His eyes never left Mac's. Put the iron down, Mac said, or we put you down. A bell clanged from the street. The sound was not a church sound. It was iron, thick and fierce, the kind that gets attention in a place where metal means life. The alley filled with the smell of coal and hot steel. A large man in a leather apron stepped into view at the far end, a shotgun tucked lazy under one arm, as if it were a cane. Hell, Mac Hank Delgado said, voice easy. You block my alley and I cannot roll a wheel out of my shop. Mac's mouth twitched. Mind your forge peg leg? Hank took one more step. The light found the oak stump of his left leg where his trousers ended smooth. The shotgun never wavered. Holster up, he said, or I test this on your hat brim. Mac weighed it and lowered his gun. Pete followed. The other two twitched, then obeyed. Hank's eyes cut to Lena, then to Cole. Shop, he said. They moved as one. Hank walked behind the shotgun, angling the direction of the men who had almost been killers. His blacksmith shop breathed heat and pillared smoke. The anvil was a mountain in the center, and the forge threw a heart-red light that turned everything into a scene from a deeper place. I remember you, Hank said to Cole, setting the shotgun on pegs and flipping the door latch. He tapped his wooden leg with 2 fingers. You carried me 2 miles at Sharpsburg. I owe you. Cole said nothing. The 2 men looked at each other and let debt settle without getting noisy about it. Kane, Hank said. Kane, Cole echoed. Hank spat in a bucket. You cannot walk up to Providence without losing half your blood on the way. A shadow moved in the side doorway, a man thin as wire and gray as sage. He took his hat off, and his eyes were sharp and bright in a weathered face. You still run quiet, Mercer, he said. Wyatt Finch. You ruined my shot once in the Galenas. Never apologized. Cole nodded. We need Providence. Wyatt's mouth tilted. There was a tunnel the company sealed when a man died under rock. They closed the mouth with boards and a prayer. They did not fill the throat. Another shape filled the doorway. A big man ducked under the lintel hands like paddles, face cut with old lines that did not change when he smiled. Bow rider Hank said, waving a hand. Digs as well as he eats. Bo set a canvas satchel on the bench, the heavy thing settling with a thump that made dust jump. He opened it. Sticks wrapped in brown paper stared up like fat candles. Lena stared back. Bo scratched his neck. For tree stumps, mostly. Lena set her palms on the bench to steady the tremor she would not show. Ruth is at Providence, she said. Kane knows. He will use her to bait me or to punish me. We go. Hank's eyes tracked the brand on her shoulder and the way her mouth set around the words. He went to a rack and took down a short carbine with a clean bore. He checked the chamber, then held it out butt first to Lena. Stance, he said, feet under you, cheek to wood. Breathe in, aim out. Do not slap the trigger, roll it. Wyatt slid a box of cartridges across the bench. You hit where you look, he said like it was a simple thing. Eyes open through the shot. Cole's mouth tightened. She does not need to fire. She needs to live, Hank said. They worked while the day slid past the shop windows. Wyatt sketched a map with chalk on the scarred wood, his finger tracing the Arroyo line by memory. Hank hammered a strap, and the ring of it made your teeth sing. Bo packed the canvas and checked fuses with a craftsman's tenderness. Lena lifted the carbine to her shoulder until the muscle burned, then lifted it again. Cole stood near the door and listened to the world for hoofbeats, for the slow scrape of a boot where it should not be. By late light, the air in Copper Ridge had changed. The sky to the west stacked up in grays and bruised purple. Lightning stitched behind the mountains like someone trying to mend a tear. The smell of rain got thicker and lay in the shop like a dog under a table. Hank set the shotgun on the pegs again and watched the door. He did not say hurry. He did not need to. Wyatt capped the chalk with his thumb and wiped the board with the side of his hand until the lines were only ghosts. Bo tied the satchel shut and lifted it with care. The leather creaked. The sound was small beside the deep, rolling growl that came across the flats and found the shop roof. The forge popped as if in answer. A single fat drop of rain fell through the doorway and burst on Lena's bare shoulder, right on the ring of the R. The skin jumped. She did not flinch. She rolled her shoulders under Cole's too large shirt and checked the carbine once more by feel. The bell in Hank's hand stopped, not because he meant it to, but because there was nothing left to announce. The town held its breath. The smell of wet iron rose when the next drop hit the anvil and hissed. They left as the first steady run of rain stitched the street to the desert. Hank latched the door of the forge behind them. The shop exhaled a last pulse of heat and went quiet. Wyatt took point without a word, a shadow with a hat and a direction. Bo lifted the canvas satchel like a sleeping child and moved with a care that did not match his size. Cole walked at Lena's shoulder. The carbine was warm wood in her hands. Water beaded on the barrel and ran along the groove of the sight. They kept to the back lots until the town fell away. Dry Creek was not dry anymore. Water slithered in the bottom of the arroyo like something unsure of itself. The sky north of Copper Ridge flashed, lightning stitched inside cloud. The smell of wet iron from Hank's anvil followed them in memory. Wyatt dropped into the arroyo and let the darkness take him. They followed over slick clay and the smooth backs of buried stones. Rain ticked on Lena's hat brim. Once a night bird called. Twice the land answered with a low groan as water found an old path. They left the main cut at a wash where a mesquite had twisted itself into an old man's shape. Wyatt slipped between boulders and disappeared into a wall of vine and fallen rock. His lantern clicked a small match flare cupped in his palm, then a shaved wick showed its thin light. The opening he revealed was no more than a crack. Board silvered by weather made a false face. Wyatt pried at a nail with his knife, and the board moved with a sound like breath held too long. "Tight for 50 steps," he said. "Hold the wall. Speak if the roof talks back." Bo passed the satchel across on a rope so it did not knock and tell everyone where they were. Cole slid in after Lena and put his palm to the low ceiling, feeling the timber feeling for rot. Earth smell filled the narrow place. Damp moved along the curve of her spine. The lantern made a small island of light that floated on darkness. The floor was gritty and slick. At 20 steps, Lena's breath came too fast. Cole's voice was a low hum behind her. Not words, only a sound that set a pace. She counted under her breath 1 to 10, then again. At 48, the tunnel let go. The ceiling rose. The walls moved back. Wyatt lifted the lantern and a rough chamber showed itself ribs of old timber holding a low dome of rock. Water threaded down one wall into a black pool. The air was warmer. Somewhere ahead a lantern swung and made a ghost light shake. Wyatt snuffed his flame with 2 fingers. Darkness settled like a blanket. The world shrank to sound. Drip on drip the small slide of gravel under a boot. The slow breath of 4 people who were not ready to be a story yet. Bo's satchel touched the floor with a soft drag. He leaned in until his breath warmed Lena's cheek. 10 minutes, he said. Main gate and the ore shed. First pop, count 30. Second pop, that is your turn. Cole touched the big man's shoulder once. Bo nodded and slipped into a side drift that angled up his size lost in the rock. Time turned thick. Lena rubbed a thumb along the carbine stock and found a scratch she had not noticed. Cole's hand touched her arm and rested there. The roof ticked. Water found a new seam. The first blast came like a hand clapped over the mine's mouth. Air shoved at them. Dust fell and made a taste of chalk and old smoke. Men shouted far away. Another lantern swung and the ghost light changed direction. The second blast was closer. The chamber boomed. A hail of pebbles pattered across the floor. Somewhere above, someone cursed and ran. Their moment became a door. Wyatt lit the lamp again and kept the flame low. He led them into a passage where old tool marks ran like ribs. When they stepped into the main shaft, the The size of the place made the lantern a joke. An elevator cage hung dead in the middle cables, black with grease. A staircase climbed the wall in raw timber twists. The rain had found its way down. Water whispered on the boards and in hairline cracks. Voices echoed. 2 guards stood at the opening that led to the living quarters and offices. One smoked a cigarette that glowed a small red eye. The other leaned on his rifle and yawned. A messenger came from the left at a run breath ragged. "Abel wants everyone up top," he said. "Gate and shed are lit. Move your backs." They looked like men who did not want to leave a post that felt safer than outside. The messenger swore and pointed with his rifle. "Everyone means you two. Go." They moved. The messenger followed. When their backs were past the line of shadow, Wyatt whispered, and the 4 of them crossed the open floor of the shaft like water across a stone. Lena's boots found boards that had not yet rotted. Cole's hand at her shoulder made a path where paths did not exist. The corridor to the offices smelled of paper turned old by damp. The upper floor was a line of doors in a narrow hall. Most stood open on rooms with desks and ledgers and furniture nailed to the floor so it could not walk away. At the end of the hall, one door held a padlock that had been painted and repainted until the layers made a scab. Bo met them there. He did not break the lock with a show. He took it in both hands and turned slow and careful until the metal cried out and gave. He twisted the hasp out of its staple, then lifted the latch like a man taking off a bandage. Ruth Lena said not loud, not soft, the word thick and full. A woman sat on a cot with her hands tied in front of her and her mouth set. Her face was a map of yellowed bruises. She lifted her head and there was Lena's face in different lines. The moment took both their air. Then Ruth moved and Lena moved and their arms closed around each other and did not let go. "You came," Ruth said into Lena's shoulder. "You told me where," Lena said. Cole cut the cord from Ruth's wrists. The rope fell to the floor and left raw grooves. He did not touch the bruises on her face. His eyes took in the room with a soldier's quick scan. The one window had been bricked up years ago. The walls were stone and old intentions. The lock hung useless. "Can you walk?" Wyatt asked. He did not waste a word on kindness he could show in other ways. Ruth pushed herself up. Her knees wobbled, then held. She looked at Bo and Wyatt and Hank and felt the shape of their help without asking for its price. They made the corridor in a line that moved fast without looking like it moved fast. The mine breathed deeper. Somewhere below, a beam complained but did not break. The main shaft opened under them like a throat. Well, now, a voice said from above. It carried with the easy authority of a man used to rooms listening. "Is that the heart girl I was missing?" Randall Kane stood on a landing halfway up the staircase. Rain from an opening above had slicked his hair to his skull. His coat was buttoned lies flat. He held a rifle as if it were a quill. A man in a priest collar stood beside him with the long face of a prophet painted on a barroom sign. Abel Sutter's rifle covered the angle where the hall met the shaft. His eyes did not blink. Cole stepped forward until he was between the line of fire and the sisters. He did not lift his gun. His voice found a register that would reach Abel and Randall and a few men behind them who thought they were invisible. "Providence was a poor choice for a church," he said. "Too many exits that are not windows. Paper does not burn well in the wet. The ledger will read just fine." Abel's mouth tightened. He flicked a glance at Randall. "You told me your desk was clean," he said. Randall laughed without humor. "He is bluffing." Cole did not blink. "Marshal Greeley has a copy. A second ride sealed to Cheyenne." The rain said yes from somewhere above. The shaft answered with a drip that turned to a run. Randall's rifle did not waver, but something in the line of his shoulders shifted and then returned. "You run from battle once," he said. "You run again." Wyatt's lantern guttered and flared. The mine took a deeper breath and let it out as a rumble. Bo's knuckles went white around the satchel strap. Hank held the shotgun low and steady, and the muzzle did not dance. Abel's voice was soft. "Put the guns down and leave the woman. Walk out and keep your lives." "Not a bargain on the table," Hank said. His eyes did not leave the bead of his own sight. "You do not set a price on people in my town." The storm found a crack above and sent water in a sheet down the far wall. The staircase slicked under the 2 men. A guard on the landing behind them slipped and grabbed a rail. The rail gave a little. The sound was a thin cry of old wood. Randall had time for one more smile. It did not reach his eyes. He lifted the rifle the width of a breath. Cole fired first. The crack hit the stone and came back doubled. Lena felt the recoil in her ribs as if the air itself had kicked. Abel's shot answered a splinter of board leaping off a post near her ear. Wyatt put his lantern down in the crook of the wall and took his own shot with a calm that did not match the echo. Ruth pulled Lena back toward the corridor mouth. The sisters moved together without speaking. Water found their boots and climbed. The mind's heart beat in the shake of the floor underfoot. Bo threw the satchel behind a chunk of rusted machinery and tore a fuse short with his teeth. He looked at Hank. 30 seconds, he said. Hank nodded once. Cole fired again. Randall answered, and the rail under his offhand creaked and flaked. Abel's eyes cut between the ledger bluff and the water and the men who were not supposed to be inside the guts of his mine. He did the arithmetic and did not like the sum. The fuse hissed. The corridor stank of powder. Ruth's fingers locked around Lena's wrist hard enough to leave a mark. Wyatt scooped the lantern, pinched the flame, then relit it lower and made it a guide instead of a beacon. The water was at Lena's ankles and cold as melted coin. She felt it through her boots. The charge went. The blast was inside the mine this time, short and hard. The floor heaved. Dust turned the air into something you could chew. Light vanished for a beat and returned weak and yellow. A beam at the far side of the shaft dropped half an inch and stuck. A chain rattled all by itself. Somewhere a man screamed once and then nothing. Move, Cole said, and they moved the word and the need the same thing. The corridor was a throat, and the mine was a mouth filling with water. The lantern's flame pulled to one side in a draft like breath. The sound of rainfall above thickened into a pound that you felt in your teeth. The thin trickle she had seen on the wall at first had become a run that licked at her knees. They reached the elbow of the passage. The light flickered like a thought you cannot hold on to. Lena turned her head and saw Randall on the landing with Abel beside him, both men dark as cutouts against a sheet of rain. The rifles came up a fraction. Wyatt's lamp fluttered. The wick guttered. The light thinned to a trembling coin and went out. The next breath was all darkness water and the close sound of boots finding stone. The wick died and the dark put its hands on their faces. Water pressed at their shins. Wyatt's voice came from a step ahead, no louder than a thought. Hand on the wall, left side, keep moving. Lena found cold stone with her palm. The current tried to take her feet. Ruth's breath hitched and settled. Hank's shotgun bumped Lena's shoulder and then slid ahead again. Cole's gun spoke once in the dark and the crack jumped around the shaft until it turned into a drumbeat. A shot from above chipped rock. Grit cut Lena's cheek. They made the turn at the elbow. Air ran across Lena's face, and the dark thinned into a gray wash. The shaft opened to the main chamber again. Rain poured from an opening high up a straight sheet that turned mid-air into 1,000 ropes of water. The staircase wore a shine like oil. Men pounded past on the upper level's shadows with rifles. Out, Wyatt said. Take the supply drift. Hank pulled Ruth into the lower corridor. Bo threw his shoulder into a door, and it gave. The four of them slipped into a narrow passage and vanished into the rock. Cole was not in front of Lena anymore. She turned back. A shape broke from the stair and fell to the machinery level with a crunch of wood. Abel Sutter rolled to a stop on his face. His collar was dark. He did not move. Up the stair, Randall, Kane, and Cole locked together, each man with a piece of the other's life in his hands. Randall's rifle clattered away and slid into a dark gap. He got both hands on Cole's throat and drove him back into the rail. The old timber cried out. Rain hissed on iron. Cole, Lena said, and the word was a shock in her own mouth. There was no room to shoot. Wind raked the platform. Water hammered. Lena kept low and ran for the outside stairs. Her boots slipped and caught. The door at the top banged in the wind and then stuck. She shoved with a shoulder and the door gave and hit a crate. Abel's pack lay open inside. Coils of rope, a belt knife, a paper-wrapped bundle that stank of powder. The knife was gone. The rope was there. On the platform, Randall drove Cole sideways and the rail gave an inch more. The boards under their boots skated under rain. Cole took a breath that sounded like someone else's and twisted. His knee found Randall's hip. The rail cracked. Both men dropped out of view and hit a ledge 15 feet down. Cole caught a spur of rock with one hand, his other hand locked on Randall's wrist. Below them, a black wash moved through a cut in the stone and threw pale foam when it hit. Randall's face was gray under the rain. His boot scrabbled for purchase and found nothing. "Help me," he said to Lena, and the words were a bare shape, ugly and human. Cole's voice climbed up the rock with the water. "Rope," he said. "Him first. If I let go, he falls." Lena looped the rope around a support post and hauled on it to feel the bite. The fibers cut her palms. She threw the coil and watched it snake through the air and drop past the men. Randall let go of Cole's wrist with one hand and caught the rope. The movement pulled Cole's shoulder hard. He grunted and held. "Climb," Lena said. Randall climbed jerky and strong. The rope went stiff in Lena's hands. She braced her feet and took his weight. He reached the platform and rolled onto the board's chest, heaving. His eyes went to the doorway and then back to the rope. Lena held the end and stared at him until he reached out and grabbed the post. She lowered the rope again. "Hold," she said. Cole found the rope with his good hand. The one that had kept Randall from falling hung loose and red. He set his boots against the wall and came up step by step while the rain tried to peel him away. Lena hauled. The rope burned. Her teeth clenched and a taste of tin filled her mouth. Cole's hat fell and spun into the dark. His head came up level with the platform and he reached. Lena got both hands under his armpits and dragged. He spilled onto the boards like a man wrung out. When he stood, his left shoulder bled through his shirt in a bright fan. "Move," he said. They went through the door Lena had forced. The passage ran to the surface with the pitch of an old road in a bad year. Wind dragged at them. Water drummed on sheet iron overhead. The service shaft mouth gaped on the east side of the works, a narrow hole with a ladder bolted in. Randall went first without waiting for permission, the ladder ringing under his boots. Lena followed, then Cole. Rain ran down the shaft like a small river and made their hands slick on the rungs. Cold slid through their clothes and settled into their bones. They came out on the mountainside into a night loud with water. The world had lost its edges. Rock mesquite sky, all gray and motion. The creek below had stopped being a creek. It ran bank to bank brown and fast-lifting logs and broken boards and the occasional flash of something that had been a fence. Thunder rolled on and did not stop. "Bridge," Randall yelled. He pointed downstream. "Miners used it. Holds in flood." He ran along the slope. Lena and Cole followed. Twice, Cole stumbled and caught himself with his right hand. His breath sawed. The blood from his shoulder washed into the rain and vanished. His jaw set and stayed. The bridge was a span of rope and wood that someone had built with care and someone else had not maintained. It swung over the flood, one anchor tied to a boulder big as a cottage, the other to a cottonwood whose roots showed their teeth in the cut bank. On the far side, figures stood under a slant of rock, half shadow, half men. Hank's hat brim caught a flash. Wyatt lifted a hand. Bo moved into the open, and the floodlight of lightning silvered his face. "Your turn," Cole said to Randall. Randall stepped onto the slats and tested weight the way a cautious man tests a story. He crossed with small steps that grew larger. Wind pressed the bridge out and pulled it in. The ropes groaned. Randall reached the far side. Hank stepped out with the shotgun at his hip and sent him to the wall with a look. Wyatt's carbine never wavered. "Go," Cole said. Lena started out. The wood was slick and cold through the soles of her boots. The ropes had a life of their own. Halfway across the flood, sucked at the air and made a sound that came from deep in the earth. Lena put one foot, then the other eyes on Hank's face. He held her with his gaze like a hook holds a line. She reached the far bank and hands took her elbows and pulled her up. Ruth's arms went around her and did not let go. Cole set foot on the first slat. Lightning stitched above and turned the world white. A second flash struck the cottonwood on the near bank. The tree split with a sound like a shot. The top half fell onto the anchor rope, dragged the boulder in its bed 6 inches, then more. The knot jumped. The anchor slid. The far rope snapped and the bridge dropped away under Cole like a rug pulled by an angry hand. He grabbed the guide rope with both hands. His left hand slid on blood and rain and lost. He hung by his right and swung out over the flood. The current surged and threw spray up into his face. The rope spun. His shoulder jerked and his mouth opened without sound. Bo grabbed the standing anchor rope on the far side and wrapped it around his forearm until the skin went white. "Hold," he said, and no one argued. He stepped into the empty air and let the rope take him. The line bowed down. The water reached. He slid boots in space and caught Cole at the waist. The two men swung together against the near bank and bounced away. Bo locked a forearm over Cole's chest and went still. "Pull," Hank shouted. Hank, Wyatt, Ruth, Lena, even Randall all took the rope and heaved. The line cut into palms and burned. The flood tried to take what it could not have. The rope lifted inch by inch. Bo's boots scraped rock and held. Cole hung limp in his arms. The line came level with the bank, and hands caught cloth and leather and skin and dragged both men onto the mud. Cole's eyes were open and glassy. His breath came like someone working a bellows out of time. His left sleeve was black and wet. The wound along his shoulder had stopped bleeding only because there was nothing left to give. Hank went to one knee beside him. "We carry," he said. Bo stood with the help of the boulder and shook water from his hair. He took Cole up like a sack you would never drop. Wyatt moved to the side and took the lead. Ruth kept a hand on Lena as if any wind could still take her. Randall stood with his back to rock wrists in front of him. Hank tore the laces from Randall's coat and tied them at the man's ankles, then his wrists quick and tight. Randall looked down at the knots and did not comment. They left the broken bridge and climbed the slope away from the roar. The rain softened for a moment, and then came harder, a curtain that hid the valley. Copper Ridge sat somewhere beyond the wash, its lamps dim behind sheets of water. Hank pointed to the shoulder of a hill where a juniper leaned crooked over a cut. The ground there held a path that people had used since before maps. Bo shifted Cole higher and set his jaw. Lena moved to his other side and laid her fingers on Cole's wrist. The pulse beat stubborn and small. She did not take her hand away. Ruth was on her other side, her breath calm and even in the downpour. No one spoke. They moved through wet rock and cactus and the smell of crushed sage. Mud tried to keep their boots. They took their boots back. The thunder rolled on without counting. Hank's cabin burned with forge heat and wet wood. The storm pushed against the walls and hissed in the stovepipe. Cole lay on the kitchen table with his shirt cut away and his left shoulder a mess of blood and rain. Hank poured whiskey on a rag until it dripped. Wyatt set a kettle to boil and rolled his sleeves. Bo stood at Cole's boots and held them when the pain came up like a wave. Lena took Cole's right hand and set it against her chest. His fingers were cold. He watched her face while Hank probed with a pair of blacksmith tongs that had been scrubbed and boiled and scrubbed again. The metal clicked against bone. Cole's jaw locked. Sweat jumped on his upper lip. The bullet showed dull in the wound. Wyatt steadied Hank's elbow and breathed when Hank breathed. They worked in a rhythm that had no room for fear. When the slug came free, it hit the pan with a tin note. Hank dropped it there and pressed a fresh cloth hard. Blood climbed through the weave and slowed. Wyatt took thread through a needle held in the blue cone of a lamp until the steel blushed. He stitched, while Cole stared at the sealing eyes wide and clear and unblinking. Ruth counted the stitches under her breath and only stopped when she saw Lena counting too. The storm eased to a steady run on the roof. Bo stoked the stove and coffee took over the room. Cole drifted and came back, drifted and came back. Sometime before dawn, his skin cooled and the fever that wanted him changed its mind. He slept with his mouth open, and Lena watched the slow rise under the blanket and did not move until sunlight pushed a pale square across the floorboards. Hank and Bo took Randall Kane at first light. His wrists were bound. Mud streaked his fine coat. He did not ask where they were going. The jail in Copper Ridge smelled of mildew and old stories. Sheriff Trammell signed a receipt with a blunt pencil and locked a door that had been waiting years to shut on a man like Randall. Marshal Elias Greeley rode in 3 days later with 2 men and a ledger wrapped in oilskin. He laid the book by the stove and turned the pages with care. The ink had bled, but the numbers kept their shape. Names had been written before the storm put its hand on them. Roots and dates and the neat initials that had lived in the back of a mind now lived on paper in a way that did not change. Greeley spoke to each of them while the stove popped. He asked few questions and listened to what people said when they thought they were only telling a piece. At the end, He took a sealed envelope from his coat. He looked at Cole as if seeing a man he already knew. "Orders from Washington," he said. "Your record is cleared. Back pay to follow. That pocket watch can sit honest again." Cole touched his vest where the watch rested. He did not open it. He nodded once and looked at Lena. She looked back and saw something go loose in his face that had been tight for too long. Judge Beauregard Kincaid arrived on the same stage that brought a box of sewing needles and a stack of newspapers. He held court in the upstairs room above the mercantile where the floor slanted and the windows faced the cottonwoods. Randall stood with his hands cuffed and his chin lifted as if a photographer had asked him to hold still. The judge read and listened and set a date. The jury at Cheyenne took less time than it takes a stew to cool. Not much argument remained after the ledger, and the testimony rode into town under a federal seal. On a clear morning with frost like lace on the grass, the verdict walked out of a warm mouth and into cold air. Randall did not look at Lena when the sentence was said. He looked at the window. His eyes did not see the trees. The court broke like a flock of small birds. People took their hats and their opinions and went back to work. Judge Kincaid set a stack of papers on the table in the blacksmith's shop that afternoon. He signed and passed them without speeches. Divorce, asset division, title to 200 acres of land that had never had Lena's name on it until that minute. She held the deed and felt the weight of paper that outlasts weather. The winter turned long and then let go. Snow in the high draws melted and ran cold and sweet where Dry Creek made a curve under cottonwoods. Men repaired fences. Women beat rugs with willow wands on lines strung from posts. In the yard behind Hank's shop, a new sign leaned against a sawhorse. Hart House had been burned into the board with steady heat, each letter dark and deep. Ruth rubbed oil into the grain until the wood drank and shone. They raised a barn on the east edge of Lena's land. Bo walked beams and set rafters with a hammer you could hear to the road. Wyatt measured with his eyes and was right every time. Hank took a collar of iron and welded it around a split post, the metal hugging the wood as if it had grown like that. Cole worked with one arm guarded for a time, then with both. Sawdust stuck to his skin. A small girl sat on a stump and watched with a silent attention that belonged to someone used to making herself small. Her mother washed jars at the pump and glanced at the girl without calling her name. When the roof went on, Lena saw the girl jump once at the sound of the final nail and then settle, and the look that crossed the mother's face had more in it than relief. Women came in ones and twos. The gate stood open and the porch held a chair by the door. Night brought lamplight to windows that had not known it. Ruth chalked letters on a slate and taught when the day's work was done. A widow named Mrs. Lyons mended harness and read psalms in a voice that softened the room. A young mother learned to set a post level and laughed when the bubble in the vial found center. Soup simmered. Bread baked. The smell of yeast and coffee and soap made a new weather under the cottonwoods. One afternoon, a carriage rolled up in a fuss of dust and good horses. Rebecca Carter climbed down in a dress the color of iron sand and shook hands with Bo as if she already knew him. She toured the rooms with Lena, and Ruth asked questions that mattered and took notes with a pencil that did not hesitate. She listened until she had enough and then set a small leather case on the table. Inside was a bank draft. Her smile was not soft. "Use this," she said. "Use more when you need it." Hank fitted a new kettle in the kitchen and made it sit flat. Wyatt limed the root cellar. Bo hung the Hart House sign in the west light and stood with his hands on his hips, as if the board might decide to float away. Cole took Lena walking that evening along the creek. The water talked against stones. Willows lifted pale new leaves that trembled. He had a box in his pocket that had once held solder. He did not look at it while they walked. They stopped where a bend made a pool. The sky turned the surface into a sheet of copper. A crow hopped along a fence post and looked at them with a shine. "I asked Hank for help," Cole said. "He would not let me touch the silver until I had the temper right." He opened the small box and showed what rested there. A ring of plain metal folded smooth and set with a pearl that had a gentle light. It was not perfect. The inside held a nick where a file had slipped. He held it in his palm as if it might take flight. "If you want it," he said, Lena did not take it at once. She looked at Cole and saw soot ground in his knuckles and the clean line where a blade had kissed his cheek that morning. She saw the place where the scar at his neck disappeared under his collar. She set her fingers on the ring and felt the warmth from his hand come into the metal. Then she held out her left hand. The ring slid home as if it had known her all along. "It fits," she said. He smiled without putting teeth in it. He let out a breath he had been holding for years. When he kissed her, the river kept talking, and the crow shook its feathers and settled. The months learned a new shape. Work began before heat and ended when the light failed. Some days were loud with saws and children. Some were quiet and full of mending. Cole hung his pocket watch on a nail by the door and wound it every morning. It kept time as if it had not missed a beat. Ruth kept books at the kitchen table and tucked receipts under a chipped cup if the wind tried to steal them. The brand on Lena's shoulder faded to a pale mark. It did not ask for attention. It did not vanish. Evening laid gold down in the yard. The barn threw a lilac shadow across the packed dirt. An open window let piano notes drift from inside where someone who knew a hymn taught it to someone who did not. Smoke moved straight up and then curved with a breeze. The porch had a new rail smooth under a hand. A woman in a threadbare dress came up the path with 2 children, a boy who stared and a girl who did not. The woman stopped at the gate and looked at the house as if the building might answer a question. Lena met them halfway and spoke in a voice that was low and sure. The children looked at Cole, then at the pump, then back at Lena. Somewhere a rooster crowed late and complained about being wrong. As the light left the yard, lamps filled the windows again. Cole stood at the threshold with his hand on the jamb. He looked out at the cottonwoods and the pale line of the road and the small moving shapes that meant people. Lena crossed behind him and set a hand on his back. He turned and she slid her fingers into his. They stepped inside. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.